Alrighty, so this is my attempt at playing Scythe on stream. Had some issues setting up the camera, very big board, have to use multiple cameras. I will be able to toggle back and forth between these two views. Right now it's not the most optimal setup, but I'll probably have to rethink this, but I really wanted to play today. I am playing solo. I'm playing Scythe. Comes with a they call an automata. There you go. I'm saying automata deck that allows you to play for solo. And this first video that I'm recording is set to just kind of be a quick rules primer, and then I will try playing one game with the solo rules. I have played the game multiplayer. I have not played the game solo, so I will be learning as I go along as far as the solo game goes. From everything I read, it's pretty similar to the multiplayer game. It's just that you have a deck of cards that controls the computer as if it was an AI. But some of the rules are a little wonky, so it might take a little bit longer. But anyway, let's kind of teach the game first. I'll do a very quick rules primer so I can post it on the YouTube channel, and you can follow along from there. If you need to learn how to play the game, if you are not familiar with Scythe at all. So, 1 second, let me grab my rules, my little handy dandy sheet so that I can kind of cover this. So, Scythe, it's a board game set in alternate history, 1920s. It is a time of farming and war, broken hearts and rusted gears, innovation and valor. It plays 1 to 5. Generally, it's about a 2-hour game. We'll see how long the solo goes. Who knows? I might lose very quickly, and maybe it doesn't take that long. We'll find out. But a little backstory. The ashes from the First Great War still darken the snow in the 1920s Europa. The capitalistic city-state known simply as the Factory, which fueled the war and heavily armored mechs, has closed its doors, drawing the attention of several nearby countries. Characters from the 5 factions converging into a small but highly desired swath of land, who will gain fame and fortune by establishing their empire as the leader of Eastern Europe. And even though it's 5 factions, there are actually 7, 2 with the expansion, which I also have, but I will not be playing with today because that is too advanced for me right now. But hopefully, I will graduate and get there. So, object of the game. Basically, you are trying to be the person who has the most money at the end of the game. There's lots of ways to get money. There's a bunch of conditions, including getting money. Victory points at the end of the game are all converted into money. The game ends when a single player gets 6 of their stars onto the board, onto this track up here, which I will explain how those various conditions can be met. But the second one player gets their 6th star on the board, the game ends, and then we calculate who has the most money, and whoever has the most money wins. You basically accumulate tokens, which is the money in this game. No, do they have a name for the money? I just gotta call it money. You get money basically for all the stars that you place on the board. You get money for every territory that you control. You get money for every 2 resources controlled, and that's all represented on the board here. Money for each star, territory, and resources you control. And also, I'll just say this right now, the way I had to set this up with my camera for this time, I'm actually standing on this side, which is why you're going to see my hand this way. It's a little bit weird, I know. The mount that I have for my camera doesn't fit the other way, so I have to find another solution, and I didn't have enough time to figure that out today. But hopefully, before my next stream, I will reorient the board a little bit so that I can actually stand on this side. But for now, I'm standing on this side. Yeah. So, anyway, Let's just talk a little bit how the game plays. I'm probably not going to hit every single rule. You're just going to have to kind of watch. But I'll explain some concepts. These spaces on the board are home bases. Every faction has a home base. It's not a territory. Expansion factions are also on the board, but I'm not playing with them. Control. You control a territory if you have at least one unit there, a character, a worker, or a mech. So these are workers. I have a worker here, so I control it. This is a mech because this mech is in the home territory. It's not control, but if my mech was here, I would be controlling this territory. Resources, tokens, wood, food, metal, and oil remain on the board once produced. And actually, let's... so far away. You're going to see me leaning in front of the camera. These are the 4 resources that are up on the board. Also, every time I do that, I don't like how it refocuses, but whatever. I will deal with that. I might move those resources to this side of the board at some point. Anytime you generate resources, they go onto the board themselves. You only control the resources if you control the territory. So if you have resources on the board and somebody moves into your territory, they can take the resources. And of course, there is a new update for my chatbot as I'm teaching the rules, but sure. I'll deal with that later. Not a big deal. When you spend them, you also spend them from the board. So if I have to pay for something with, say, two wood, I would take it literally right off and put it back in the pool. Resources. Type of units. We have characters. We have mechs. And we have workers. Only mechs and your character can fight. Workers cannot fight. If a mech or a worker walks into a space with a worker, they will be forced to retreat back to your home territory. Against and solo rules is a little bit different, but I'm just teaching the game right now as if this is multiplayer, and then I'll talk about the solo rules later. Anytime you force a worker to retreat, you go down in popularity, which is this track over here. Yeah, I really don't like that. I wish I could fix the focus of this camera. Let's see if I can do that real quick, because I don't like that it keeps autofocusing. Properties, bigger video. Let's see, autofocus. Turn that off. And now, if I do this, alright, you need to stop beeping too. Yes, let's change settings. Boop, boop. Alright. Okay. Characters are the only ones. Oh yeah, so basically, yeah, if you make a worker retreat, you go down in popularity. Popularity is what you use to control like how many resources you get at the end of the game for these different things. The higher your popularity, the more they're worth. So stars at the end of the game will be worth 5 if I have high popularity, but only worth 3 coins each if I have low popularity. So you do kind of want to be popular at the end of the game. Characters can engage in combat just like mechs. If you end a turn and you have a mech and a character, or a mech and a mech, all kind of in the same location, then battle happens at the end of the turn. I'll talk about battle later. Workers also have a special ability where if they go into either a space with a factory or a space with this encounter symbol, they will get an encounter card. Encounter cards look like this. Actually, I'll talk about encounter cards later. I don't need to flip one right now because I don't have to reshuffle. But basically, when you get an encounter card, you get a little story. You get a picture, you can describe what's going on, and you get a bunch of choices. Whichever choice you choose, you get those resources or whatever the card says, whatever is offered. The basic rule of thumb, if a piece is plastic, it can fight. If a piece is wood, it can't fight. It just automatically loses. So that's kind of the rule of thumb there. Workers can produce resources, more workers, and deploy mechs and build structures. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Mechs also have the ability, let's say that these are this white mech and this red worker, let's say they're on the same team. When you move one space at a time. Sometimes you can move 2 spaces with upgrades, but in general, workers move 1 space, mechs move 1 space at a time, your character moves 1 space at a time, but a mech can pick up any number of workers and move them with the mech. So another concept to just kind of keep in the back of your mind. So at the start of the game, you choose a random faction and a random player mat, and I'll show you what these look like right now. So faction mat looks like this. This is faction specific. There's special abilities for each faction. It indicates what starting cards you start the game with. For instance, I start with 3 combat cards. 1, 2, 3. My opponent. So I am the. Who am I? I am Anna and the Wojciech. This is Olga and Chinja. This is the Soviet Union, Republic of Polyana. So Polyana, Soviet. This is I'm white. My opponent today will be red in this game. You get to see what your starting combat cards are on your faction card. You also get to see what your starting power is. Power is something that you use for combat, which I'll explain later. But this is on the main board. There's a power track, which I'll flip back to in a second. So I start with 2 power. They start with 3 power. But I get 3 combat cards. They get 2 combat cards. In addition, you get to see how many objective cards that you get, how many, what your starting popularity is, and how much money you start with the game. So I start with 6 money. Money. All the tokens I have are the upgraded Kickstarter. They're all real nice. This, you can hear it. Sounds like real. Actually, can you hear it? Interesting. There's no. Yeah, I guess there's no sound because, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, anyway, the change sounds pretty nice. I can jingle it by the microphone later if you really want to hear it. So what else? Player mats are different. Player mats are also randomly generated. Based on which one that you randomly choose determines the turn order. There's a little number on the side that tells you where you go in the turn order. They have different layouts, but in general, they all have the same basic functions. They just have different costs and different resources associated with it. But for the most part, they all do the same thing. And I'll explain how player mats work in a second. So, gameplay. Let's talk about some gameplay. So, basically the way the game works, I take a turn, my opponents take a turn, everyone takes a turn, the game just keeps going round and round and round and round, no set number of rounds. Like I said, the game ends when somebody gets 6 stars on the main board. Basically on a turn, what's going to happen is the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your action token, which is this guy, and you're going to place it in one of these 4 spots. Depending on where you take it, you are going to take a top row action and a bottom row action for that particular turn. Every time it's your turn again, you must take a different action. So I can't go this space and then this space again. There are some factions that can, but for the most part, most factions cannot. So if I do this on my first turn, the second turn I have to do this. Then I can go back to this on the third turn. Basically, when you take an action, you must do whatever it says up here. Well, you can choose to do the top or the bottom, but if you choose to do both, you have to do the top before the bottom. I could just choose to do the bottom action and skip the top. But basically, your actions are And again, the order on the mats are going to be a little bit different, but you can move, you can bolster, you can trade, and you can produce. Moving is pretty straightforward. When you move, you can move guys, or when I take the action, I can get a coin if I want to, if I don't want to move. And then at the bottom, I can upgrade, deploy, build, and enlist. And basically what an upgrade action is, an upgrade action lets, if I pay 2 oil drums, I can take one of these boxes on any row up here and move it to any of these boxes down here. And what that's going to do is it's going to make my top action a little bit better. So now, like, let's say if I upgrade my move action, I'll now get 2 coins every time I take that action and get the coins versus 1. In addition, because I'm moving the box down here, whatever the pay action is, like let's say normally I have to pay, 2 food. Normally I have to pay 3 food in order to take the enlist action. I can take that cube, cover up this cube with the upgrade action, and now this only costs 2 food to pay. So that's the upgrade action. The bolster action. Bolster basically just it increases your power track. Power, like I said before, you use during combat, which I'll talk in general. Power is also one of the ways you can get a start on the board if you get your power track all the way up to max, which is 16. I'll switch over to that and show that in a second. If you get it to 16, then you get a star. But other than that, it's used for combat. And then deploy, if I pay all this right here, which is basically 4 iron for this character. Other characters have, like I said, different ratios and costs. But for this player mat, it costs 4 iron. I get to deploy a mech, which means I get to take one of these and put it into my home base. Plus, I also get 3 coins for deploying it. So even if I can't deploy a mech, I can still get the 3 coins, but I have to pay all this to be able to get all that. So when you deploy a mech, every race has special powers underneath. So once I get my mech onto the board, I get access to this power, and there's 4 powers, and I'll explain what the powers are as I play. Every faction has slightly different unique powers, but that's what the deploy action is. Trade, basically, if I pay 1 coin, I can get 2 resources in any territory that I own on the board that I control. I can just put any 2 random resources that I want into that territory. Or I can increase my popularity. Down here I can build. If I pay this, I can build a structure. A structure is one of these 4 buildings right here. I always forget the names of these structures. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so we have a mine, a mill, an armory. Oh, they're on the board. Duh. A monument and an armory and a mill and a mine. These let you build a structure into any territory that you can control. So as long as you control it, you can build. You can build directly onto the territory. So if I take the build action and I'll flip over, let's say that I control this territory right here. I could put a building onto it, and now I get a special power. Each one of these buildings give you a special unique power, and I will explain how that works in a second. Basically, a mine just acts like a mine special on the board that you can use. It's like your own personal mine. I'll talk about mines in a second when I talk about movement. A monument, anytime you take the bolster action, you get to increase your popularity by 1. So anytime I take this action, because this is now on the board, this is now revealed, and I now get my popularity, and it goes up 1 by 1. The armory does the same thing, except for with power. So once I get this onto the board, every time I take the trade action, I also get to boost my power. And then the mill basically acts like a worker for when producing resources. I'm going to talk about producing right now, but basically it acts like a third space that you can produce on in addition to what you normally can produce on. And it also acts as if there's a worker there. So that's the build action. You get those onto the board. There's also a win condition, generally dependent on buildings. This is a variable thing. This is one of the variable ways. This is another way to get coins at the end of the game. For this game, this is the tile that I chose, and basically for every building that I have next to an encounter hex that has this symbol, depending how many I have adjacent, I will either get 2, 4, 6, or 9 coins. So basically if I have 4 buildings next to 4 encounter or 5 encounter spaces, I'll get 6 coins. This is something you have to pay attention to get more victory points at the end of the game. Generally people fight over these spaces, so it's important to kind of keep that in mind every game that you're playing. Last but not least, produce. Produce basically lets you produce, and I'll show you on the map. Lets you produce anywhere where you have a worker. So let's use this as an example. There's a red worker here, and there's a red worker here. If I take the produce action on 2 hexes where I have at least any number of workers, I will produce whatever that hex's symbol. So for instance, here I have 1 meeple or 1 worker, so I will produce 1 iron. There's also the ability to produce other workers. If you have a worker here on this worker space, I would also get to produce a worker. I take a worker from my board and put it down. Let's say that I had 2 workers on this one space, I would produce 2 iron on that space. So basically produce is 1 for each worker. And then just as an example, let's say I also had a mill here. This would be a 3rd hex in addition to 2 other hexes that I can choose that I can produce on. This acts like a worker, so it counts at least 1 worker. I would get at least 1 oil drum. If I had a 2nd worker, assuming this was my worker, I should probably do it this way. Let's say that I had a mill and a worker. I'd be able to produce 2 oil on this in addition to the 2 other hexes that I produce on. And then the last thing, and I'll switch back over, is the enlist action. And the way enlist actions work is you pay what you need to pay, which is food in this on this card, and you basically get to enlist one of these 4 spaces, and you get 2 coins. And all enlisting is you get to take one of these cylinders, and you get to put it onto one of these special spots that are on your faction card, and it's like a one-time bonus that you get. So let's say I put this here, I would get 2 cards, or if I put this here, I would get 2 popularity, 2 coins, or 2 power. In addition, once this is revealed, anytime one of my neighbors in a multiplayer game takes an action that's, in this particular case, the produce or enlist action. In this case, the enlist action, all they have to do is, let's say they put their guy on the enlist space. I would get a card every single time one of my left or right neighbors take that action. So the same thing for this. If somebody were to take the trade or build action, I would go up a popularity for every single time someone on my left and right would take that action, in addition to getting the one-time bonus. In a solo game, it works a little bit differently, but because I'm not playing with other players, but general premise is there. Sometimes it will trigger bonuses for me, and bonuses are good. So I mean, that's generally what you're doing every single turn. You're taking an action, doing the top, doing the bottom. Play goes on to the next player, they do it. It keeps going around and around. So forth and so on until someone gets 6 stars, and then you count up all the money and see who wins. Every faction has a unique ability, also listed on their board. For instance, my faction, every time I encounter an encounter card, normally there's 3 choices. You can only choose 1. My faction can choose 2 every single time. Every faction has a different ability, but that's who I just randomly chose today. I've not played as them before, so we'll see how this goes. So combat. Anytime two players are in the same space. Let's say I move here, I move into this space. At the end of the turn, if we have two plastic pieces in the same space, we're gonna fight. What's the first thing we're gonna do? And I'm looking at the wrong board. So let's say that I finished my turn here. Let's say I also have a mech. So I have a mech, my character in this space, and red's in this space. We're gonna have a combat. So we fight. So basically, what's gonna happen in a real game is we would both take dials. Whoops, we both have dials that we would play with, and what we're gonna do is in secret we're going to adjust this dial. Whoops, yeah, I'm sideways here. We would adjust this dial so that whatever is right underneath this icon, let's say in this case 3, we're going to spend that much power to fight each other. So at the beginning of the game, we don't have a lot of power. As you can see, I just realized power is not, didn't get power on the board. Let's see if I can fix that somehow. Alright, so power is here. What is... This is... Alright, let's see if I can fix this with... There we go. Not perfect, but it'll do. Yeah, it'll do. Yeah, so I'm on the side of the board, so now you can kind of see my feet and you can see me moving left and right. Yeah, so anyway, I don't like that aspect of it. Let me see if I can zoom in just a tiny bit. I don't need to see the whole... I guess that's the best we're going to do. So, anyway, so this is the power track. So at the beginning of the game, we start out pretty low on the power track, but let's say that I was 10 on the power track, and let's say that they were 5 on the power track. So when it's time to battle, I can commit up to 7 points or no points for this battle. So the max you can commit from this power dial is 7, and it's done in secret. So both players simultaneously would spin this dial. They would choose up to the amount that they want to spend. And no matter if they win or lose, whatever they flip, that's how much power they're going to spend. So if I say I'm spending all 7, I would lose, 7 points all the way back down to 3 on my power meter. I could also bluff and spend nothing. In addition, you can also commit power cards. So every power card has a value. There we go. From 1 to 5. The distribution of cards is on the board up here. There's 16 twos, 12 threes, 8 fours, 6 fives. And I can commit any number of cards to this check. And in addition, it's secret how many cards. So even though they might know I have 3 cards, I can choose to commit 0, 1, 2, or 3. However many cards I'm going to submit to the combat would be hidden underneath this. And then when it's time, we would both reveal how many cards we have. And whoever has the highest combat would win. In addition, for each of your units that are involved in the combat, you get... Yeah, so you can only commit as many cards as units you have in a battle. So if I have 2 units, I can commit 2 cards. If I only have 1 unit, I can only commit 1 card, so forth and so on. Yeah, and whoever wins, wins. So basically what happens after you both reveal, the winner gains or maintains control of the territory and all the resources in it. The winner places 1 star token on the combat space. So whenever you win, you automatically get to put a star token directly onto the board. You can do that up to twice. There is a race that can do that more than twice, I believe. But as long as you win, you get a star onto the board. So that's pretty important. If the winner was the attacker, they lose 1 popularity for each worker they force to retreat by initiating winning combat. Also, if there was an encounter token on the territory and the winner has a character there, they now perform the encounter. So, yeah. So you would also get the encounter. Not sure how that can happen exactly, but I guess it could. I don't know. The loser must retreat all their units, mechs, characters, and workers from the combat territory to their home base. All resource those units were carrying remain on the territory, and now the winner controls it. If the loser revealed at least one power on their dial or through combat cards, they gain a combat card when they retreat. So losers get a combat card when they retreat. If a battle happens in a lake, which can happen with upgrades at the beginning of the game, you can't walk in water at all, but some upgrades let you do stuff in lakes. Any mechs transporting workers is attacked while in the lake, and the attacker wins combat. The attacking player loses 1 popularity for each of those workers as well. So you lose popularity for combat in this game, but you also get stars really fast. So that's kind of like the balance there. Talked about encounters. Factory. If at any given point in time in the game a character ends their turn on a factory and they take control with a character only, they get one of these 3 factory cards. These factory cards basically, and I can take one from the discard. Just kind of show you what they look like. They get to take one from whatever's there. You always play with 1 card more than the amount of players. So the first one in a 2-player game would get to look at 3. The next one would get to look at 2, so forth and so on. This basically acts like a 5th spot on your player board. You can do the top action and the bottom action. The bottom action is always a move 1 guy 2 spaces. It's also the only way that you can basically take moved actions turn after turn. Without this card, you basically could take a move action every other turn, which is a lot slower. This particular one, you can pay 1 power to get 3 coins, but they're all different kind of variant types powers that you can get with these cards. They're pretty important to try to get early on. Usually people are fighting over it, so forth and so on. You can only get 1 factory card at the end of the game. If you control the factory at the end of the game, it counts as owning 3 territories instead of 1. Every person gets 2 objective cards at the beginning of the game, and this is another way you can get a star onto the board. I'll show you what mine are for this particular game. Since I'm playing solo, I can just do it publicly. It doesn't matter. One of the things I can do is I can become a beloved pacifist. I can have a power of at least 13 popularity and at least 5 workers. Once I have 0 power, at least 13 popularity, and at least 5 workers, I can flip this card anytime that I meet that condition, and I can put a star on the board. Or I could build at least 3 structures, have at least 7 popularity, and have 0 mechs. So this is creating a permanent foothold. So I can do either of these to get a star onto the board, or I can do none of these. There's lots of other ways to get stars on the board, but this is another way. This is done in secret. Once you accomplish one of these, you discard the other one that you can't do. You can only get 1 star on the board for your objectives at any given time. In a multiplayer game, there you could do alliances and bribes, but you can't in a solo game, so I'm not even going to cover that. But the general idea is if you do a bribe, you can basically say like, hey, don't attack me, you can attack me, attack this person, so forth and so on. And the only thing that you can give is your money. You can't offer anything else in the game. And nothing you offer is binding, so potentially somebody could, give somebody money and say do this. They could take the money and just screw you over anyway, so that's up to you. So anyway, the ways you place all the stars is you can complete all 6 upgrades on your player board. You can deploy all 4 of your mechs onto the player board, onto the map. You can build all 4 structures. You can list all 4 of your recruits. You can have 8 workers on the board. You can reveal an objective card. You can win combat twice. You can get your popularity all the way up to 18, and you can get your power all the way up to 16. And that's how you get a star. Like I said, the game ends the second immediately when a player gets their star on the board. Then you do game end and scoring, so forth and so on. You declare a winner, and there's tiebreakers and all kinds of stuff. So that's the general idea for for Scythe. Generally you play with other people, but like I said, they built in a solo variant to this game, and I'll talk about that now. The solo variant, the rules, like I said, are a little bit weird, so I'm going to be teaching myself this as I go. I haven't played this. I've read the rules a few times, but I haven't actually played with it, but it seems pretty straightforward. I'm just going to probably, for the first game, have to reference a bunch of stuff. But the Automata has its own rulebook, so I'll show that. And basically the way it works is so let me reset the board first before I forget. Put the mechs down. Where's my other mech? Right here. There we go. All right. So I take a turn like normal. I play basically just like a human would. All the same rules apply to me. All the things that I could do normally apply to me. But the Automata, they follow a set of their own deck basically every turn. You're going to flip over a card, and there's going to be a move command. There's going to be a way that they gain resources or they gain things. They don't actually play with resources. They never actually are controlling resources on the board or anything like that. So when you fight, there's ways to get resources on the card. But basically, there's 3 steps. You can move them. They gain something. And what's the 3rd step? I'm already forgetting. They gain something, and then they, I think, gain something. I know I'm not saying it correctly, but here. Let me look in the rules. Yeah, so they draw an automatic card. You perform a single automata move action. Automata gain stuff, and then you may receive a recruit bonus. Sorry, that's the other thing. Recruit bonus is basically the same thing as if another player took an action. Since they're not taking actions, like here, they don't take an action. But on this one, I would get a recruit bonus on either of these if I had the enlist taken on either one of those spaces. Here, I'll show you this one. So they would do one of these movements, whichever one fits first. Sometimes a movement might not be possible based on the card. They would get 2 coins, and then if I had the free space on the list, so like there, let me show you. Let's do it this way. Let's say which one? For this one, no, not this one. I believe it's this. Yeah. So I would get the enlist bonus for this and for that icon as well if I had the ability to get it. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the iconography though. Boop, boop, boop. These actions, so I don't see actual symbols for that. Like I don't know what this symbol is. I have to look that up. It's not. This is heart. That's a card. Here, let's look at some more of these just to get a better idea. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, okay. Never mind. That just means okay. Got it. That action just says I would get the enlist bonus for this. This is not actually an icon. Enlist bonus. So, for example, this card, if I had this revealed, I would get this enlist bonus. All right. So, at the beginning of the game, there's 2 sides to these cards. There's Scheme 1 and Scheme 2. Scheme 2, things start getting really hard. There's a trigger. So, at the beginning of the game, I'm always using the green side. At a certain point, I'm going to have to switch over and start using the red side. Basically, the auto meta, how they put stars is governed by this card. Every turn, when I flip over a card, if it has this symbol, I'm going to move this up this track 1 by 1. If this ever gets to here or here, anytime it gets to one of these, I put a star on the board as if the automata succeeded in getting a star on the board. In addition, the automata can get a star by beating you in combat twice, and if they get their power track all the way up to 16. The automata's popularity never moves. It's always at 10, so it can never get that star. So the only ways it can get stars is if it ever beats you in combat twice, which can happen. If it ever gets the military up to 16, or if it covers one of these spots that has a star. I'm playing against the auto meta, which is the easy difficulty. I'm going to do that for the learning game. On the easy difficulty, there's also this symbol, which is this icon. Anytime this comes up, I don't do a move action. So that only happens during the easy automata phase. When you play on hard difficulties, that doesn't happen. But for the most part, like I said, these cards govern everything that they do. I'll cover it a little bit more in detail. Combat is governed by the bottom of this card. For instance, if we start fighting, based on its power, it will tell me. I'll have to flip over one of these and look and see how much power it's willing to use when fighting it, and also how many cards it's going to submit. In this particular case, it doesn't submit any cards, but like for this one, for instance, if I drew this as a combat card, let's say its power was 12, it would do 7 combat on the dial and submit 1 card at random. So I would have to have enough combat to both handle the 7 points and also, I don't know what its cards are, so it could have 1 to 5 extra points. So I'd have to adjust accordingly. And since they don't ever drop resources on the board, anytime there's like if I fight them and I take over a space and there's some sort of resources that I get, I would also look at the last card that I drew for their actions, and whatever this symbol is, I would get 4 symbols of whatever that is on that hex, resources for whatever that hex is, or in this case, I would get none, so forth and so on. There are some minor rules differences. For instance, automata have the ability to teleport around the board, which is a little bit weird. I'll talk about that at some point. They also cannot cross over any rivers or water until a certain point in the game. I'll cover that. I didn't talk about that for a multiplayer game. In general, you cannot cross over water, any rivers, until you unlock your river walk ability, which is another thing I didn't talk about. One of these special skills is the ability to river walk, and once you unlock it, basically you can only cross over rivers to particular icons based on the icon that you unlock. So for instance, I am the Polania. So when I unlock the river walking ability, I can move to any space that is a worker space to any iron. So if you look at my starting area, I can move across a river. Where can I move? I don't see any spaces. Oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong spot. I'm on this side, sorry. So from this side, I could go from this worker space. I can cross over the river to this iron and back and forth, but I couldn't cross this river because, again, for Pollyanna, it's worker spaces to iron spaces only. I can only cross over in these spaces. My opponent, the Rusviets, they can, if they were a human player, they would only be able to cross over from food and worker spaces. So they'd be able to cross over from here to these 2 spaces, but then from here they'd have to take land all the way around. Also tunnels, these are tunnel spaces. These are all adjacent to each other, so I can go from this tunnel to this tunnel, this tunnel to this tunnel. If I get my mine out on the board, let's just say I'm white and I get my mine out here, my character could go from this mine also to this space as if it was a mine space as well. So the automata, they don't use the river walking. They can cross over all water and lakes once they unlock that ability. It's a little bit different. Yeah, and I think that covers the gist of the game. So Not a perfect rules summary by any means. Like I said, this is not scripted. I'm just kind of teaching it like I would teaching players. But yeah, you can reference this if you want to learn how to play, or go look at much better rule summaries like the Watch It Played stuff on YouTube, which will give you a much better summary of how to play. But now I'm going to try and play my first game solo and see how it goes. This could go horribly, I don't know. Hopefully I'll pick up the automata rules pretty easily, but like I said, for the first game it might go a little bit slow. Only because, like I said, the automata stuff has a bunch of rules that governs all the different scenarios. So there's all these cards, what to do when you encounter a factory, how to resolve combat. You know, basically every single symbol has its own card, and while it seems pretty straightforward, I don't have it memorized yet, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, I am going to get started in about 1 minute.